All right, let's dive in. Today we're going deep on this Medium article with a pretty provocative title.
Oh, yeah.
Having a big dick doesn't mean you're great in bed.
Hmm. Interesting.
Listener sent this one in, so let's see what the author has to say.
Yeah. Sounds good.
So the author, Ariana, kicks things off by pointing out how this whole big equals good thing is just everywhere.
Right. It's like inescapable.
It really is. Like, romance novels always have the hero well endowed.
Core.
Movies make a big deal out of it. Even like TikTok thirst traps,
Oh, totally.
It's like ingrained in our culture or something. What do you think, like, from a psychological standpoint, what's fueling this obsession?
Well, there's probably a few things at play, right? I mean, there's the evolutionary biology angle, the whole passing on your genes thing.
Ah, makes sense.
But I think more importantly, it's tied to how we as a society define masculinity.
Okay, yeah.
A bigger penis becomes this symbol of power,
Yeah.
virility.
It's like a shortcut to proving your manhood.
Exactly. Like, you're a real man if...
But isn't there, like, some level of physical attraction that's just natural? Like, we're hardwired to notice certain things, right?
Oh, absolutely. But it becomes a problem when we fixate on one attribute above all else.
So we lose sight of what actually makes for good sex.
Exactly. And that's where Ariana's experience with this guy, Abe, gets really interesting.
Oh, Abe, I was cringing reading about him.
Really?
She builds him up, right? Everyone's talking about his size, so expectations are high.
Ah, I see.
But then the actual encounter is a total letdown.
Oh, no.
He skips foreplay. He's basically just lying there the whole time.
Ugh, the worst.
She even compares it to, and I quote, having sex with a dildo suction cup to a wall.
Wow, that's...
Ouch, right?
Yeah, I mean, that simile really says it all, doesn't it? Like, you can have the size, but without the connection, the passion.
The effort.
Yeah, it's just empty.
Like going to a concert just for the light show and ignoring the music.
Perfect analogy.
So if size isn't the key factor, what is it? What does Ariana say?
Effort. She uses a great line. It isn't the size of the boat, but the motion in the ocean.
I love that.
It's not about what you're packing, it's about what you do with it.
So true. But what does that effort actually look like in practice? I think a lot of people might struggle with that.
Yeah, it's multifaceted.
Mhm.
It's about being willing to explore, to try new things.
Be adventurous in bed.
Exactly. It's about paying attention to your partner, what they're saying, their body language,
Tuning in.
making sure they're enjoying themselves, not just focusing on your own pleasure.
So it's about being present,
Yes, and responsive.
adapting to your partner's cues.
Exactly. And that's a skill,
Yeah.
something you learn and develop over time. Thinking about Abe, it's not just that he's a bad lover, it's kind of a consent issue too.
Oh, that's a really good point.
Like, just because someone has the equipment
Right.
doesn't mean they know how to use it responsibly.
So in Abe's case, it's not just about being clueless in bed. It's about totally ignoring Ariana's comfort and what she was trying to tell him.
Right, and that brings up the whole idea of consent in general.
Yeah. What does that look like in a situation like this?
Well, it's not just a one-time yes at the beginning,
Oh, so it's not like getting the green light and then you can just go on autopilot.
Exactly. It's a constant back and forth, checking in, being aware of your partner's responses.
Oh, I
Yeah.
see. So being in tune with what they're saying and how they're reacting throughout.
Totally. And with Abe, he just bulldozes right over her.
It's almost like he thinks his size gives him a free pass.
Like he thinks that's all it takes.
Right. But that's so messed up.
It is, and that's why it's what Ariana is saying is so important, like challenging that whole bigger is better myth.
It's like she's saying, hey, size might get you attention, but being a good lover, that takes effort, emotional intelligence, respect.
Exactly.
I wonder if some guys with larger penises, like, rely on that. Like, they think it's enough.
That's an interesting thought. Like it's a crutch.
Yeah. And that ties back into how we view masculinity, like what society tells us about sexual prowess.
It's all about performance, dominance.
Those superficial things.
And we forget about the other stuff, like
Yeah.
communication, vulnerability.
Real connection.
Exactly.
And that can be so damaging, like feeling like you have to live up to this impossible standard.
Oh, totally. It creates so much anxiety, insecurity.
But thankfully, it feels like people are starting to talk more openly about consent, communication.
Right, shifting the conversation.
It's not just about size anymore.
It's about mutual pleasure, respect.
So how do we dismantle those stereotypes? It feels like such a huge task.
It's going to take time, but I think education is key.
Okay.
Starting these conversations early, in schools, in families.
Making it normal to talk about this stuff.
Yes, And for those of us who maybe didn't get that kind of education,
Like, is it too late to unlearn those old ideas?
it's never too late. We're always learning and growing, and that includes our sexuality,
So being open to new information, challenging our assumptions,
and talking to our partners, being honest about what we want, what we need.
like taking control of our own sexuality, not letting society define it for us.
Exactly. And recognizing that pleasure, intimacy, they can look different for everyone.
So expanding our definition of what it means to be good in bed.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not just about the physical, it's emotional, psychological even.
Like a whole person experience.
Exactly.
And that's something we can all work towards.
It's a journey, not a destination.
I like that. So we've talked about the big dick myth, consent, the influence of media, and the power of communication.
You've covered a lot of ground.
But there's still more to explore, right?
Absolutely. In part 3, we'll dive into how cultural narratives, especially in pornography, can warp our views on sex and relationships.
Ooh, looking forward to that.
And we'll talk about how to cultivate a more mindful and empowering approach to sexuality.
Stay tuned, everyone. It really makes you think, you know? What other stuff are we buying into when it comes to sex and relationships?
Oh, tons, I'm sure.
Like, especially with all the images and videos we see online.
Right. It's
All
constant.
these perfect bodies, perfect encounters. It's hard not to compare.
It sets the bar so high.
It really does. And I think a big part of that is pornography.
Oh, definitely.
For some people, it can be a way to explore,
Sure, it has its place.
but it also presents this really distorted view of sex,
Like it's all about performance, how it looks.
not the emotional connection.
Exactly. Like the intimacy gets lost.
It's like watching a cooking show versus actually cooking, you know?
Ooh, I like that analogy.
The show makes it look so easy, but in reality...
There are messes, there are mistakes.
Exactly. So when we internalize these unrealistic portrayals...
Right, it sets us up for disappointment.
Totally. How do we become more mindful of this stuff? Like, how do we develop a healthier view of sex?
Well, I think it starts with being critical, like really looking at the messages we're consuming.
Not just passively taking it all in.
Right, like questioning if those messages align with our own values.
So being selective about what we choose to believe and internalize.
Exactly. It's about taking ownership of our own sexuality.
I love that. What about our listeners? Like, where do you find good information about sex and relationships? Stuff that feels empowering, realistic?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's like we're all curating our own sexual education these days.
We have to. And don't forget about communication.
Oh, that's crucial.
Talking to your partner about your concerns, your fantasies, your boundaries.
The more open and honest you are, the better.
It builds trust,
Don't they?
intimacy.
They make everything better.
It really does. So as we wrap up, remember, sex is a journey, not a destination.
I love that saying.
We're all learning, exploring, growing together.
And that's what keeps it interesting, right?
Absolutely. Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive.
It really has.
We talked about the big dick myth, consent, the influence of media, and the power of communication.
So much good stuff.
We hope you found it as insightful as we did.
We hope it sparks some important conversations.
And most importantly, we hope you feel empowered to embrace your own unique journey of sexual discovery.
Prioritize pleasure, intimacy, and connection in all your relationships.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time for another exploration of the human experience.